The dark crimson Cabernet dripped from Annie's eyelashes, staining the white silk of her dress like a fresh wound. The chatter of New York's elite at the Pierre Hotel died instantly. Silence. Absolute suffocating silence. Standing over her with an empty crystal goblet was Victoria Sterling, her mother-in-law. A sneer twisted across her perfectly made-up face. "You are nothing," she hissed, loud enough for the board of directors to hear. "You are a stain on my son's life, and you don't belong in a room with people who actually sign paychecks." Victoria thought she had just destroyed her daughter-in-law. She thought she was disciplining a penniless nobody. She didn't know that the $800 million contract she was desperate to sign tonight wasn't with the man in the suit across the room. It was with Annie. And she just poured wine on the hand that held the pen. To understand why Annie Vance was standing in a ballroom letting a woman humiliate her, one has to understand the lie she had been living for 2 years. She met Liam Sterling at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. He was charming, a bit lost, and struggling to step out of the shadow of his family's dynasty, Sterling Enterprises. When they met, Annie made a choice. She introduced herself as Annie, a freelance graphic designer. It wasn't exactly a lie. She did enjoy design, but it was a massive omission. She didn't tell him that she was the founder and majority shareholder of Vanguard Global, a private equity firm that had quietly acquired major stakes in logistics, tech, and pharmaceuticals across 3 continents. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not for her portfolio. And Liam? He fell for her. Or so she thought. They married quickly. It was a small ceremony, mostly because his mother, Victoria Sterling, refused to attend. She called Annie a gold digger from day one, despite the fact that Annie insisted on a prenup that kept their assets separate. Victoria didn't know the prenup was protecting Annie's billions from the failing Sterling empire, not the other way around. For 2 years, Annie endured her insults. "Annie, don't touch the china, you'll break it. It's worth more than your education. Annie, try to dress better, you look like you shop at a discount bin." She took it. She took it because she loved Liam. But lately, Liam had changed. The pressure of the family business was crushing him. Sterling Enterprises was bleeding money. Their logistics division was outdated, and they were $200 million in debt. Their only hope was a merger, a buyout, really, by a mysterious firm known as Vanguard Global. That morning, the tension in the Sterling estate was palpable. Annie was sitting at the breakfast table, nursing a coffee, when Victoria stormed in. She was a striking woman, always wearing Chanel, always looking like she smelled something unpleasant. "Liam!" she barked, ignoring Annie completely. "The gala tonight is non-negotiable. The representatives from Vanguard are going to be there. Rumor has it the CEO, the elusive EV, might even make an appearance. We need this deal or we are filing for Chapter 11 by Friday." Liam looked tired. He rubbed his temples. "I know, Mother. I'll be there." "And her?" Victoria pointed a manicured finger at Annie without looking at her face. "Does she have to come? She's an embarrassment. She doesn't know how to hold a fork, let alone a conversation with high-net-worth individuals." "Annie is my wife," Liam said, but his voice was weak. It lacked the fire it used to have. "She comes." Victoria slammed her hand on the table. "Fine, but if she ruins this, Liam, if she so much as breathes wrong in front of the Vanguard rep, I will cut you out of the will. Do you understand? This deal is worth $800 million. It is our lifeline." She finally turned to look at Annie. Her eyes were cold, dead things. "Wear something appropriate, Annie. And by appropriate, I mean try not to look like the charity case you are." Annie sipped her coffee, hiding the smirk, threatening to form on her lips. "I'll do my best, Victoria." "I hear the head of Vanguard is very particular about manners." She scoffed. "What would you know about the head of Vanguard? Stick to your little drawing apps and leave the business to the adults." If only she knew. The EV she was terrified of was sitting 3 feet away, eating toast. The gala was held at the Pierre, one of Manhattan's most exclusive venues. The theme was Old money, which was ironic considering how much new debt everyone in the room seemed to have. Annie spent the afternoon on a secure call with Harrison, her chief of operations and personal attorney. Harrison was the face of Vanguard. He was the one who took the meetings, shook the hands, and kept her identity shielded. "They're desperate, Annie," Harrison said, his voice crackling slightly over the encrypted line. "Victoria Sterling has been calling my office every hour on the hour. She's offering the logistics division for a steal just to get the liquidity." "Hold the line, Harrison," Annie said, adjusting the diamond stud earrings she rarely wore. "I want to see how she behaves tonight. The deal depends on management retention. If she's volatile, I'm not buying a company just to inherit a headache." "She's your mother-in-law, Annie," Harrison sighed. "Isn't that already a headache?" "Business is business, Harrison." Personal feelings aside, if Sterling Enterprises is rot at the head, Vanguard won't touch it. Tonight is the final test. She hung up and looked at herself in the mirror. She had chosen a dress that was elegant but understated. A midnight blue silk gown. It was expensive, a custom design from Paris, but it lacked the flashy logos Victoria adored. To her, no logo meant it was cheap. When Annie walked downstairs, Liam was waiting. He looked dashing in his tuxedo, but his eyes were anxious. "You look nice," he said, checking his watch. "Listen, Annie, just stay by the bar, or maybe in the back. Mom is on a warpath. Please." Her heart sank a little. "Liam, I'm your wife. I should be by your side." I know," he snapped, frustration leaking out. "But this is $800 million, Annie. Do you have any idea what that kind of money means? It means I don't lose my childhood home. It means I don't become a failure. Just do this for me. Be invisible. Be invisible." That was the request. They arrived at the Pierre in silence. The ballroom was glittering with chandeliers and the heavy scent of expensive perfume. Victoria was already there, holding court near the center of the room. She was surrounded by bankers and investors, laughing loudly, playing the part of the successful matriarch. When she saw them, her smile vanished. She marched over, grabbing Liam by the arm. "The Vanguard representative, Mr. Harrison, is here," she whispered frantically. "He's at the VIP table. He says the owner, EV, is in the building but incognito. They are watching us." She turned to Annie, her eyes narrowing. "You, go get me a drink, a Cabernet, and then find a corner and stay there. Do not speak to anyone." Annie looked at Liam, waiting for him to defend her, waiting for him to say, "She is not a waitress, Mother." Liam looked at the floor. "Just get the drink, Annie, please." The betrayal stung more than the insult. Annie took a breath, calming the rage that was starting to boil in her chest. She walked to the bar, her head held high. She ordered the most expensive Cabernet they had. As she waited, she noticed Harrison across the room. He caught her eye. He gave a microscopic nod. He knew. He was watching. She took the glass and walked back toward Victoria. The older woman was now standing in a circle of high-profile guests, including the CEO of a rival tech firm and a senator. This was her stage. "Here is your wine, Victoria," Annie said, extending the glass. She turned, feigning surprise, playing to the audience. "Oh, look, it speaks. Thank you, dear. I suppose you're useful for something after all." The group chuckled politely. It was humiliating. But Annie wasn't done. "I also heard you discussing the Vanguard merger," she said calmly. "I think you should be careful about the valuation of the logistics division. The market is shifting." The silence that followed was sharp. Victoria's face went red. How dare she speak business? How dare the freelance designer have an opinion? "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "What would you know about valuation?" "I read," Annie said simply, "and I know that Vanguard values integrity over desperation." That was the trigger. Victoria's hand shook. The stress of the failing company, the fear of the bankruptcy, and the sheer audacity of Annie speaking back to her combined into a perfect storm. "You insolent little gold digger," she spat. "You think, because you married my foolish son, you have a seat at this table? You are nothing." She raised the glass. Annie saw it coming. The arc of the crystal. The dark liquid swirling. She threw it. The wine hit Annie's chest and splashed up onto her face. The cold liquid ran down her neck, ruining the custom silk, dripping onto the marble floor. Gasps erupted around them. Liam froze. The senator looked away in embarrassment. Victoria stood there, breathing heavily, a triumphant, cruel smirk on her lips. "Now," she said loud enough for the room to hear, "get out of my sight before I have security throw you out. And take your cheap dress with you." Annie stood there, wine dripping from her chin. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She slowly wiped the wine from her eyes. She looked at Harrison across the room. She gave the signal. It was time to introduce herself. The ballroom of the Pierre is usually a place of soft music and polite laughter. Now it was a tomb. The string quartet had stopped playing. The waiters froze with trays of champagne hovering in midair. All eyes were glued to the red stain spreading across Annie's chest, a violent mark on the pristine elegance of the evening. Victoria stood tall, her chest heaving slightly, waiting for the applause that existed only in her head. She expected the room to side with her, the matriarch disciplining the unruly commoner. But the room was filled with sharks, not sheep. They weren't applauding. They were calculating. They were watching a woman lose control, and in business, loss of control is blood in the wire. Well, Victoria snapped at the head of security, a burly man named Davis, who had worked for the Sterlings for a decade. "I said remove her, Davis. She is trespassing. She has no business being at a shareholders' gala." Davis hesitated. He looked at Annie, then at Liam, then back at Victoria. "Mrs. Sterling. She came with Mr. Liam. Technically, she's a guest." "She is a parasite," Victoria screeched, her voice cracking. "And she is ruining my night. Liam," she spun on her son, "tell your wife to leave. Now, before I call the lawyers and have you written out of the trust by morning." Annie looked at her husband. This was it. The moment of truth. 2 years of marriage. 2 years of late-night talks, of promises that they were a team against the world. He looked at the wine dripping from her dress. He looked at his mother's furious, red face. And then he looked at the VIP table where the Vanguard investors sat, the people who held his financial future in their hands. Liam took a step toward her. "Annie," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Please, just go. We'll talk about this at home. You're making a scene." Her heart didn't break, it calcified. It turned into something hard and cold. "I'm making a scene?" she asked, her voice calm, contrasting the chaos around them. "Your mother just assaulted me in front of 200 people, Liam. And you want me to leave?" "Ideally, yes," Liam said, running a hand through his hair. "Look at you. You're a mess. Just go to the hotel room. I'll handle Mom." "You'll handle nothing," Victoria interjected. "Davis, grab her!" Davis took a reluctant step toward her, reaching out to grab her arm. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." A deep, baritone voice cut through the air like a knife. It wasn't Liam. The crowd parted as Harrison walked into the circle. He was an imposing figure, 6'3", wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than Liam's car. He moved with the casual confidence of a man who owned the room. Victoria's face brightened instantly. She smoothed her dress, a desperate smile plastering itself onto her face. "Mr. Harrison! Oh, thank goodness!" "I am so terribly sorry you had to witness this. Domestic disturbance. This woman is a nobody, a waitress my son picked up. We were just removing the trash so we can discuss the acquisition." Harrison didn't look at her. He walked right past Victoria, right past Liam, and stopped directly in front of Annie. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a pristine white silk handkerchief. With a bow that was almost reverent, he extended it to her. "For your hands, ma'am," Harrison said, his voice ringing clear in the silent room. "The Cabernet is vintage. It stains quite deeply." The room gasped. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. Victoria laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Mr. Harrison, you seem confused. That's Annie. She's the help. Well, she's my son's mistake." Harrison turned slowly to face Victoria. His expression was one of utter boredom mixed with mild disgust. "I am not confused, Mrs. Sterling," Harrison said. "But you seem to be laboring under a massive misapprehension." He turned back to Annie, his posture straightening to attention. "Chairwoman, the board is assembled. The paperwork for the acquisition of Sterling Enterprises is ready for your signature. However, given the conditions of the current management, do you wish to proceed?" Annie took the handkerchief and dabbed the wine from her chin. She looked at Victoria. Her eyes were bulging, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Chairwoman," she whispered. What did you call her?" Annie stepped forward, closing the distance between Victoria and herself. The wine-soaked dress no longer felt like a mark of shame. It felt like battle armor. "He called me Chairwoman, Victoria," she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "But you can call me Evie." The glass fell from Victoria's hand. It shattered on the marble floor, joining the puddle of wine she had thrown moments ago. "No," she stammered, shaking her head. "That's impossible. You are a graphic designer. You live in a 2-bedroom apartment. You drive a Honda." "I drive a Honda because I like to stay grounded," Annie said, stepping over the shattered glass. "And I'm a graphic designer because I enjoy art. But my day job is running Vanguard Global, the private equity firm that owns the bank holding your mortgage, the logistics company shipping your products, and, as of tonight, was scheduled to own you." Liam grabbed her arm, his face pale as a sheet. "Annie, is this a joke? You're EV, but we've been married 2 years. You never said—" She pulled her arm away from him. "I wanted to be sure, Liam. I wanted to know that you loved me for me, not for the $3 billion in my trust fund. I wanted to know that if things got tough, you would stand by my side, not your mother's wallet." She gestured to her stained dress. "I got my answer tonight." She turned her attention back to the room. The board of directors for Sterling Enterprises looked ready to faint. They knew exactly what this meant. They had just watched their CEO assault the only person on earth who could save them from bankruptcy. "Harrison," she said, snapping her fingers. "Yes, ma'am." Harrison instantly handed her a tablet. She tapped the screen, projecting the financial data onto the large monitors behind the stage that were meant to display the celebratory merger graphics. "Let's look at the numbers, shall we?" Annie walked toward the stage, the crowd parting for her like the Red Sea. She didn't need a microphone. The silence was absolute. "Sterling Enterprises," she began, pointing at the plummeting red line on the screen, "currently carrying $200 million in bad debt. Your logistics division is operating at 60% efficiency because you, Victoria, fired the experienced managers to hire your friends, children. Your Q3 earnings were fabricated to look stable. That's fraud, by the way, which my auditors found this morning." Victoria was trembling. You spied on us?" "I performed due diligence," Annie corrected. "Something you clearly failed to do when you judged me." She scrolled to the next slide. It was a picture of the acquisition contract. The $800 million figure was highlighted in bold gold text. "I came here tonight ready to sign this," she said, looking out at the terrified faces of the Sterling employees. "I was going to pay 40% above market value. I was going to inject capital to save the pensions of the 3,000 workers you employ. I was going to do it because I loved your son." She looked down at Liam. He was crying. Actual tears. "Annie, please," he sobbed. "I didn't know. I'm sorry. We can fix this." "But," she continued, ignoring him, Vanguard Global has a strict policy regarding leadership. We do not invest in companies run by incompetent, volatile, or abusive management. She looked Victoria dead in the eye. You poured wine on me because you thought I was powerless. You insulted me because you thought I was poor. You showed me exactly who you are when you think no one of importance is watching. She tapped the tablet one last time. A large, red, deal-rejected stamp animated across the screen behind her. The deal is dead, she announced. Chaos erupted. No! Victoria screamed, lunging forward. You can't! We'll be ruined. The banks will foreclose by Monday. Actually, Annie said, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. The banks won't wait until Monday. Harrison? Harrison stepped forward, checking his watch. Since Vanguard Global is the majority shareholder of the lending consortium holding Sterling Enterprises debt and considering the public admission of insolvency we just witnessed, we are calling in the loans. Immediately! You can't do that, the Sterling Company lawyer shouted from the back. Read the fine print. Section 4, paragraph B. Harrison retorted without looking. Material adverse change in leadership stability. I'd say the CEO, throwing drinks at investors, counts as unstable. Victoria collapsed. She literally fell to her knees in the middle of the ballroom, her Chanel dress crumpling around her. She looked up at Annie, mascara running down her face. Annie, please don't do this. We are family. Annie looked down at her. Family? 10 minutes ago, I was a prawn stain on your son's life. I was trash to be removed. She handed the tablet back to Harrison. I'm leaving, she said. Harrison, make sure the foreclosure teams are at the Sterling headquarters by 8 a.m. I want a full asset seizure. Understood, Chairwoman. She turned and began to walk out. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the floor. She passed Liam. He reached out a hand, his fingers brushing her arm. Annie, where are you going? Can I come with you? She stopped. She looked at the man she had shared a bed with for 700 nights. The man she thought was her soulmate. You can go home to your mother, Liam, she said softly. She needs you. And besides, you're right. I really do need to change out of this cheap dress. She walked out of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of the Sterling Empire behind her. But as she stepped into the cool night air of New York City, she knew the story wasn't over. Victoria Sterling was a snake, and snakes don't die easily. She would strike back. And Annie would be waiting. 3 days passed. Silence from the Sterling camp. But Annie knew better than to think they were packing boxes. She was sitting in her corner office on the 45th floor of the Vanguard building, looking out over the Hudson River. The Sommeter office was stark, modern, and intimidating. Everything Sterling Manor wasn't. Harrison walked in, his face grim, holding a remote control. You need to see this, Annie. Channel 4. He turned on the large wall-mounted screen. It was The Morning Chat, a popular national talk show. And there, sitting on the beige couch, looking like a grieving widow, was Victoria Sterling. She was wearing a modest gray dress, no jewelry, and dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She's acting, Annie said dryly. Turn up the volume. The host leaned in sympathetically. Victoria, these are serious allegations. You're saying the collapse of Sterling Enterprises wasn't due to mismanagement, but sabotage? Victoria sniffled, looking directly into the camera. It's hard for a mother to admit she was fooled. This woman, Annie, she didn't just lie to my son. She lied to the world. She committed corporate espionage. She infiltrated our family under a false identity, posing as a poor graphic designer, to gain access to our proprietary trade secrets. She sabotaged our logistics deals from the inside to lower our stock price, so her company, Vanguard, could buy us for pennies. Annie's jaw tightened. It was a lie so bold, so audacious, that it was actually brilliant. She broke my son's heart, Victoria continued, a tear sliding down her cheek. Liam is devastated. He married a woman he thought he was saving, only to find out she was a shark waiting to eat us alive. We are filing a lawsuit today for fraud, emotional distress, and we are contesting the prenuptial agreement. Since she signed it under a false identity, it is void. We are entitled to half of her assets as restitution for the destruction of our family legacy." Annie turned off the TV. The room went silent. "She's going for the fraudulent inducement angle," Harrison said, pacing the room. "If she can prove you married Liam solely to destroy the company, she can tie up your assets in court for years. The deal is dead, but she's trying to drag Vanguard down with her." "And Liam?" she asked. "Is he a part of this?" Harrison placed a file on her desk. "His signature is on the lawsuit as a co-plaintiff." She stared at the signature. The loopy L, the sharp M. She had seen that signature on their marriage certificate. On Valentine's cards. Now it was on a document trying to strip her of everything she had built. "He chose," she whispered. "He actually chose her." "They aren't just suing for money, Annie," Harrison warned. "They've leaked this narrative to every major news outlet. The hashtag Vanguard Vulture is trending. Investors are calling. They are scared. Victoria is trying to destroy your reputation so you'll settle just to make it go away." Annie stood up and walked to the window. Below, the city moved like clockwork. Victoria thought she was playing 4D chess. She thought that by dragging Annie into the mud, she would pay her to stop. She forgot one thing. Annie Vance doesn't pay ransoms. "Harrison," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "get the car. Where are we going? To the lawyers?" "No," she said, turning back to him, eyes blazing. "We're going to the Sterling estate. She wants a show? I'll give her a finale." "Annie, that's dangerous. Davis is still their head of security." "Bring the private security team," she ordered. "And bring the red file." Harrison froze. "The red file? Annie, are you sure? Once you open that box, there is no going back. That's federal prison time for her." "She accused me of espionage," she said, grabbing her coat. "She wants to talk about secrets? Let's talk about where the $200 million really went." The iron gates of the Sterling estate looked less like the entrance to a home and more like the walls of a besieged fortress. Outside, the world was screaming. A sea of paparazzi had camped out on the verge, their cameras pointed like rifles through the wrought iron bars. Satellite trucks from CNN, Fox, and MSNBC idled with their engines humming, waiting for a glimpse of the corporate spy wife who had supposedly seduced and destroyed an American dynasty. Victoria's interview had done its job. The public was hungry for blood, and currently, the menu featured Annie's name. Inside the back of her armored SUV, the silence was heavy. Annie adjusted the cuffs of her white suit jacket, a stark, clinical contrast to the midnight blue silk she had worn the night she was humiliated. Tonight she wasn't dressing for a gala. She was dressing for an execution. "The crowd is hostile," Harrison said, glancing out the tinted window as a camera flash exploded against the glass. "They're shouting, gold digger." "Victoria's narrative has legs, Annie. If we don't kill this story in the next hour, the Vanguard board is going to demand a statement. Our stock is down 4% in pre-market trading." "Let it drop," she said coldly, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. "It makes the buyback cheaper." "We aren't here to issue a statement, Harrison. We're here to perform an exorcism." She tapped the leather briefcase resting on the seat between them. The red file. It wasn't just evidence. It was the nuclear option. The heavy gates groaned open, pushed by private security, and their 3-car motorcade swept up the long, winding driveway lined with ancient oaks. The Sterling Manor loomed ahead, a sprawling, ivy-covered beast of a house that smelled of old money and rotting foundations. It looked impressive to the untrained eye, but Annie knew the truth now. The roof needed repairs, the staff hadn't been paid in 3 weeks, and the antique vases in the hallway were likely insured for double their value in hopes of a clumsy maid. When the car stopped, she didn't wait for the driver. She stepped out, her stilettos crunching on the gravel. The front door flew open before she even reached the steps. Victoria Sterling stood there, framed by the entryway like a queen guarding her castle. She was flanked by Liam and Marcus Thorne, the family's reptilian lawyer who looked like he sweated grease. Victoria didn't look scared. She looked triumphant. She wore a cashmere cardigan and pearls, the picture of the grieving, betrayed matriarch she played so well on TV. "You have some nerve," Victoria called out, her voice dripping with disdain. "Coming here, after what you've done? The press is at the gate, Annie. One word from me, and they'll be swarming this driveway to take pictures of you begging for forgiveness." "I don't beg, Victoria," Annie said, walking up the steps, Harrison silent as a shadow behind her. "And I certainly don't ask for forgiveness from thieves. Get out." Liam stepped forward. His face was a wreck, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept since the gala. "You lied to me for 2 years, Annie. You made me look like a fool. My mother was right about you." That hurt. It felt like a physical slap. But Annie let the pain transmute into fuel. "Your mother," she said, stopping inches from his face, "is right about a lot of things, Liam. She's right that money changes people. She's just wrong about who it changed." She pushed past him, walking into the grand foyer. It was colder than she remembered. The heating must have been turned down to save money. "You are trespassing," Marcus Thorne squeaked, hurrying after them. "I will call the police." "Please do," Annie said, walking straight into the formal drawing room. She sat down on the velvet sofa, the one Victoria had forbidden her from sitting on during Christmas because her jeans were too rough. "In fact, I insist. Harrison, invite Mr. Thorne to sit down. He's going to want to take notes." Victoria stormed in, her face flushing a dangerous shade of crimson. "This is harassment." "I have a restraining order being drafted right now. We are suing you for fraud, Annie. We are going to take every penny of that private equity money you hid from my son. It's marital property." "Is that what this is about?" Annie asked, crossing her legs. "The money? It's about justice," Victoria shrieked. "You infiltrated this family. You sabotaged our logistics deals. You drove our stock price down so you could buy us for pennies. It is corporate espionage." Annie looked at Liam. He was standing by the fireplace, refusing to look at her. He believed his mother. He actually believed her. "Liam," she said softly, "do you really think I married you for a company that hasn't posted a profit since 2018? Do you think I spent 2 years clipping coupons and cooking dinner in a walk-up apartment just to steal a logistics firm I could have bought with my pocket change?" "You're a liar," Liam whispered, his voice trembling. "You lied about who you were. Why should I believe anything else?" "Fair point," she nodded. "I lied to protect myself from people like her. But numbers? Numbers don't lie, Liam. And numbers don't have mothers." She gestured to Harrison. He placed the red file on the coffee table. The heavy thud it made echoed in the silent room. "What is that?" Thorne asked, eyeing the red leather warily. "This," Annie said, unclicking the brass latches, "is the result of a forensic audit conducted by Vanguard's fraud division over the last 72 hours. You see, when Victoria accused me of sabotage on national television, she made a mistake. She invited scrutiny. She gave me probable cause to look not just at the company's current books, but at the historicals. She pulled out the first stack of documents, color-coded spreadsheets with bank logos stamped on the headers. "Exhibit A," she announced, sliding the papers across the polished wood toward Liam. "The logistics failure of 2021. You remember that, Liam? You lost the Amazon contract. You blamed the software glitch. You fired your CTO." Liam looked down at the papers. "Yeah, it was a disaster. We lost $40 million in revenue." "You didn't lose it," Annie corrected. "It was moved." She pointed to a highlighted line. 2 days before the software glitch, a transfer of $10 million was made from the Sterling operating account to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Blue Heron Holdings. The software wasn't broken, Liam. The licensing fees weren't paid. Because the money was stolen. "Stolen?" Liam frowned, picking up the paper. "Blue Heron? I've never heard of it." "Keep reading," she said. "Exhibit B, the pension crisis of 2023. The workers threatened to strike because the fund was insolvent. Victoria told the press it was due to market volatility." She tossed another document onto the pile. $15 million transferred to a Swiss account under the name VS Private Trust. The market didn't crash, Liam. Your mother bought a villa in Tuscany and a yacht that she keeps docked in Monaco under a fake name. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock. Victoria let out a strangled laugh. "These are forgeries! He's printing fake documents, Liam! Don't look at them!" "They are authenticated SWIFT transaction logs, Mrs. Sterling," Harrison said, his voice smooth as glass. "Verified by the Federal Reserve. If they are fake, then the international banking system is hallucinating." Liam was flipping through the pages now, his hands shaking. "Mom, these dates. This is the day after Dad died. This transfer, $5 million. It says, consulting fee." "She's been bleeding the company dry for a decade," Annie said, her voice rising. "She knew the business was failing because she was the parasite killing it. And she needed a scapegoat. That's where I came in. The incompetent daughter-in-law? No. The corporate spy? Much better. If she could blame the collapse on me, she could walk away with the stolen millions and play the victim." "Lies!" Victoria screamed, lunging toward the table. Harrison stepped in front of her, a wall of bespoke wool and muscle. "I'm not done," Annie said, locking eyes with her. "That was just the theft. Now let's talk about the betrayal." She pulled out the final document. It was a single sheet of paper, enclosed in a plastic sleeve. It was a loan application from the previous month, a desperate, high-interest loan from a predatory lender, the kind that breaks kneecaps if you don't pay. The company was drowning, she explained to Liam, who looked like he was about to vomit. Victoria needed cash to cover the operating costs just long enough to get the Vanguard merger signed. She took out a $50 million bridge loan. "So?" Liam wiped sweat from his forehead. "Companies take loans." "Look at the collateral, Liam." He looked. He squinted, and then his face went white. "Sterling Manor," he read. And personal guarantee, Liam Sterling. He looked up at his mother, horror dawning in his eyes. "You put the house up?" And, "I didn't sign this. Mom, I didn't sign this." "It's your signature," Annie said. "Or, rather, a very good tracing of it. She forged your name, Liam. She made you the guarantor. When the company collapses, which it will by tomorrow morning, the bank doesn't come for her. She has no assets in her name. They're all offshore. They come for you." "No." Liam stepped back, dropping the paper as if it were burning him. "You wouldn't. Mom? Tell me you didn't." Victoria stood there, cornered. Her chest heaved. The mask of the elegant socialite cracked and fell away, revealing the terrified, greedy creature underneath. "I had to," she screamed, the sound echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "I did it for us. The company was dead anyway. Your father was a weak fool who ran it into the ground. I deserved that money. I kept this family relevant. I kept us in the circles that matter. By framing me," Liam yelled, his voice cracking. "By stealing my future, you set me up to go to prison for your debt. You were going to be fine." Victoria spat back, her eyes wild. "If that little witch hadn't ruined the merger, Vanguard would have paid us out. We would have had the $800 million. I could have paid off the loan, and no one would have known. It's her fault." She pointed a shaking finger at Annie. "She ruined everything." Annie stood up slowly. She smoothed her jacket. "I didn't ruin anything, Victoria," she said calmly. "I just audited it." She turned to Harrison. "Is it time?" "It's time," he confirmed, checking his phone. Outside, the sound of sirens cut through the air. Not the distant wail of city traffic, but the sharp, urgent yelp of police cruisers turning into the driveway. "Who is that?" Marcus Thorne panicked, grabbing his briefcase. I can't be here. I was just legal counsel. I didn't know about the forgery." "Sit down, Marcus," Harrison barked. "You notarized the loan. You're coming too! Blue and red lights flashed through the sheer curtains, painting the drawing room in a chaotic disco of police colors. Victoria ran to the window. No! No, you can't. I am Victoria Sterling. You can't do this to me. The district attorney disagrees, Annie said. Wire fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. And since the loan involved interstate banking, the FBI is tagging along. It's quite the party. The front doors burst open. Annie heard Davis, the head of security, shouting, but he was quickly silenced. Heavy boots thundered down the hallway. "Victoria Sterling!" a voice boomed. "Step away from the window. Put your hands where we can see them." Victoria stumbled back, knocking over a priceless Ming vase. It shattered, a perfect metaphor for her life. She looked at Liam, her eyes pleading. "Liam, do something! Tell them! Tell them I'm your mother!" Liam stood frozen. He looked at the forged loan document on the floor. He looked at the woman who had raised him, who had poured poison in his ear about Annie for 2 years. He looked at Annie. She offered him nothing but a blank stare. He had to choose. "Liam!" she screamed as the officer swarmed the room, handcuffs gleaming. Liam turned his back on her. He walked over to the fireplace and stared into the cold ash. "I don't have a mother," he whispered. "Get off me!" Victoria shrieked as they grabbed her arms. "My dress! You're hurting me!" "Annie, tell them to stop! We're family!" Annie watched them drag her out. As she passed, Annie leaned in close, so only she could hear. "You were right about one thing, Victoria," she whispered. "I don't belong in this room. And now, neither do you." They hauled her out, her screams fading as the heavy oak doors slammed shut. Marcus Thorne was led out behind her, weeping into his silk tie. The room was suddenly quiet. Just Annie, Harrison, and the broken man by the fireplace. "I'm dropping the lawsuit against you, Liam," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "You're not a villain. You're just a casualty." "Annie." He didn't turn around. His shoulders were shaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "I know," she said, "but sorry doesn't pay the debt she left you with. You need a criminal defense attorney, Liam. Harrison can recommend a cheap one." She turned to leave. She had won. The dragon was slain. The castle was crumbling. But it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt like work. "Let's go, Harrison," she said. "I have a plane to catch." We walked out into the cool night air. The paparazzi went wild as the police cars drove Victoria away, capturing the money shot of the year. Annie slipped into her SUV, exhausted. "To the airport, chairwoman?" the driver asked. "Yes," she sighed, leaning her head back against the leather seat. "Get me out of here." The car began to roll. She closed her eyes, ready to put the name Sterling behind her forever. Buzz. Her phone vibrated in her lap. She ignored it. Buzz. Buzz. She frowned. Only 3 people had this private number. Harrison was next to her. The office knew not to disturb her. She picked it up. It was a text from Liam. Her thumb hovered over the delete button. She should just block him. She should erase him. But the preview text caught her eye. "I found something else in her safe. The police missed it. You need to see this. It changes everything about who I am. Please come back." She stared at the screen. A trick? A trap? Or was there one last secret in this house of lies? "Stop the car," she ordered. Harrison looked at her, concerned. "Annie? What is it?" "Turn around," she said, gripping the phone tight. "We're not done yet." She told the driver to turn around. Logic told her to keep going, to fly to Tokyo and never look back at the wreckage of the Sterling family. But her gut, the same gut that told her to buy logistics stocks 5 years ago, told her this wasn't just a desperate plea from an ex-husband. She found Liam sitting on the front steps of the manor. The police were still inside, cataloging evidence. The paparazzi had been pushed back to the main road, leaving the driveway in an eerie, flashing silence. Liam held an old, leather-bound journal in his hands. He looked up as she approached, his eyes red and swollen. He didn't look like the heir to an empire anymore. He looked like a lost boy. "I thought you left," he said, his voice hoarse. "I was halfway to the airport," Annie admitted, keeping her distance. "What is that, Liam? If this is a trick—" "It's not a trick," he said, handing her the journal. "I went to her safe to get the deed for the house, to give it to the bond agents. I found this tucked behind the false bottom." She took the book. It wasn't Victoria's handwriting. It was shaky, frantic scrawl. The name inside the cover read, "Sarah J., 1995. "Who is Sarah?" she asked. "Read the entry from March 12th, Liam whispered. Annie opened the page. "Mrs. Sterling says she will take him. She says if I don't give him up, she'll make sure I never work in this town again. She says a maid has no business raising a Sterling heir. She promised me money. She promised me he would have a good life. But my heart is breaking. I have to give up my baby Liam today. I have to pretend he isn't mine." Annie froze. The words blurred on the page. "She wasn't my mother," Liam said, tears spilling over again. "Victoria couldn't have children. My father, he had an affair with the housekeeper, Sarah," Victoria found out. "Instead of a scandal, she forced Sarah to give me up, passed me off as her own to secure the family trust, and then fired Sarah." The irony hit Annie like a physical blow. It was suffocating. Victoria Sterling, the woman who had tormented her for 2 years, who had called her trash, common, and a waitress, had raised a son who was born to a maid. She hated Annie because she reminded her of the truth she had buried for 30 years. She didn't hate Annie because she was poor. She hated her because she was exactly like the woman she stole her son from. "She hated you," Liam said, looking at the ground, "because you were everything she wasn't. You were self-made. You were real. And you reminded her that underneath the Chanel and the diamonds, she was just a thief." The front door opened. 2 officers were escorting Victoria out in handcuffs. She looked disheveled, her makeup smeared, stripped of her dignity. When she saw Annie standing there, she stopped struggling. She straightened her back, trying to summon one last ounce of arrogance. "You," she hissed. "You did this." Annie held up the journal. Victoria's eyes widened. For the first time, genuine fear replaced the anger. She saw the book. She saw that Annie knew. "You didn't just steal the money, Victoria," Annie said, her voice quiet, but cutting through the night air. "You stole a life. You stole a mother from her son." "I gave him a legacy," Victoria screamed as the officers pushed her toward the cruiser. "I gave him the Sterling name. He would have been nothing without me. He would have been cleaning floors like his mother." "And look where the Sterling name got him," Annie replied, gesturing to the foreclosure notices being taped to the door. "Bankrupt and broken?" Victoria screamed as they shoved her into the back of the car. The door slammed shut, sealing her fate. Silence returned to the driveway. Liam stood up. He looked at the massive house, then at Annie. "I don't want it," he said. "I don't want any of it. The name, the house, the money. It's all poison." He looked at her with a sad smile. "I'm sorry, Annie. I know. Sorry doesn't fix the humiliation. It doesn't fix that I didn't stand up for you. But for what it's worth, I really did love you. I just didn't love myself enough to be the man you deserved." Annie looked at him. The anger was gone. All that was left was pity. "You have a chance now, Liam," she said. "The Sterling legacy is dead. You can go find Sarah. You can find out who you really are." She reached into her purse and pulled out a checkbook. She wrote a check and handed it to him. He looked at it. It was for $50,000. "I can't take this," he said. "Not after everything." "It's not a settlement," she said firmly. "And it's not alimony. It's a seed investment. You're a good graphic designer, Liam. You were always better at that than business. Take this. Go find your real mother. Start your own life. One that belongs to you." She turned and walked back to her car. "Annie!" he called out one last time. She paused, her hand on the door handle. "Thank you," he said. for saving me, even if you had to destroy me to do it." "I didn't destroy you, Liam," she said, looking back over her shoulder. "I just turned on the lights." 6 months later, the boardroom at Vanguard Global was buzzing. They had just acquired a major tech firm in Silicon Valley, a deal worth $1.2 billion. Harrison popped the champagne. "Another win for the books, Evie," he said, handing her a glass. Annie walked to the window, looking out over the city. Her reflection stared back. Stronger, sharper, but perhaps a little colder than before. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from social media. She rarely checked it, but this one caught her eye. It was a post from a small design firm in Oregon. The photo showed a man with paint on his shirt, smiling next to an older woman with kind eyes and gray hair. They looked happy. Genuine. The caption read, "Finally home. New beginnings with Sarah. Liam." Annie smiled. A real, genuine smile. She liked the post. Then she turned off the phone, picked up her champagne, and turned back to the boardroom. "All right, everyone," she said, commanding the room. "Celebrate for 5 minutes. Then let's get back to work. We have an empire to build." She was Annie Vance. She had been a wife, a victim, and a ghost. But now? Now, she was the storm. And she was just getting started. And that is the story of how a mother-in-law's arrogance cost her an $800 million empire. It's a reminder that you should never judge a book by its cover, or a daughter-in-law by her dress. Victoria Sterling learned the hard way that true power doesn't scream. It whispers, and it carries a very big checkbook. What do you think? Did Annie do the right thing by giving Liam a second chance, or should she have left him with nothing? And what would you do if you found out your partner chose their mother over you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of revenge and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss another story of karma serving its coldest dish. Until next time, stay humble and watch who you spill wine on.